You know, I really liked the snow until I bought this car.
So we're just gonna have to work in the garage instead. This serves as a continuation of my DIY series. Today we're gonna be changing out the spark plugs on my 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo Superleggera. This will work for any Lamborghini Gallardo from 2004 to 2008. I believe the LP models are a little bit different, but the procedure is pretty much the same. First off, we're gonna start on the bench. I'm gonna show you exactly why I'm changing out my spark plugs. And then we're gonna dive deep into a little bit of motor tech and what I plan for this motor and what I expect out of it in the future, because there's a small problem that I think needs to eventually be addressed, but we'll monitor it as the time goes on. So let's dive into it and I'll show you what I have on the bench. So here we are on the bench. I have a spark plug that I took out of the motor, and then I have a spark plug that's brand new. When I first purchased this car, I was actually chasing a misfire. It was misfiring on cylinder number 2 due to a bad spark or a bad coil pack, and then it was also misfiring on cylinder number 4. So what I did is I swapped this spark plug from cylinder number 4 to cylinder number 5, and the misfire went along with it. The problem was that there was actually oil contaminating the spark plug, and then it wasn't able to fire properly. Oil consumption is kind of a big issue on this specific motor. The Lamborghini V10s, especially the 5-liter even fire motor, are very prone to oil consumption issues, where like it's really common for Lamborghini to even say that you should expect a liter of oil being consumed every 1,000 miles. So, you know, I go in expecting that, and that's what fouled this plug. But I'll go over to the motor and I'll show you exactly why this happens, and some plans for the future for this motor, and what I kind of plan from it and what I expect from it. Because you're going to say, why is oil on your spark plug? But I'll get into that. So the main issue is that the stock catalytic converters, you can see one right here, and then you can see one right here, have a tendency to break down over time. I believe that it's from when you're at wide open throttle, the engine likes to run a little bit rich, and then the excess fuel that ends up in the exhaust path kind of wreaks a little bit of havoc on these two catalytic converters. And then when you close the throttle, a little bit of that exhaust comes back into the motor, along with burnt up catalytic converter material. And then that catalytic converter material that shouldn't be in your motor is now in your motor. And a lot of users have reported that you get cylinder scoring because of that. So, you know, I am gonna have to expect to rebuild this motor at some point. I mean, to me, it's not really that big of a deal. To you, you might be like, you're gonna rebuild a Lamborghini V10, and I'm like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I rebuilt a motor on my Audi. You know, it's been 7 years now, and it's still running great at 600 wheel horsepower. So I'm not too intimidated by this. A lot of gentlemen either go for like test pipes, which are basically like no catalytic converters at all, or they go for like more of a sport catalytic converter that has a little bit better material properties and it doesn't break down. I think it's just because, you know, at the time when they built this motor, they just didn't have the correct materials to build these catalytic converters, and then maybe they just didn't consider that running fuel rich might have adverse effects on these cats. But you know, it's a problem we can fix, and I might change out these cats myself as well. So, but I haven't really decided. I haven't really determined if I want to go with straight pipes, which I probably don't, or sport catalytic converters that are, you know, they look exactly the same. And then just put the regular catalytic converters in my living room, or not in my living room, in the guest room, and if I ever want to sell the car, which I probably won't, the next owner will have the catalytic converters stock. So that's the backstory behind this. And I figured at the same time I would just change out all the spark plugs, just so I could have a good baseline reference for knowing what this motor's like, and I can read the other plugs as well. So let's get right into it, and I'll show you what you need to do on your car. All right, so all you need for this fix is a socket wrench, socket extension, a 5mm hex for the socket, or if you have it in like a hex key, that works too. A set of feeler gauges for gapping your spark plugs. I don't recommend the circular spark plug gap tool that they sell at AutoZone and stuff like that. I recommend you get a good set of feeler gauges because you can use it for other things too. This is another version of a feeler gauge. I have this one as well, so I can actually change the gap and like bend the spark plug just a little bit on the ground electrode. So I have that one too. You're going to need a T25 Torx, a T40 Torx, a 16mm deep impact socket, or a spark plug socket. I'll link one of those in the description below. And then a 13mm socket. This is optional. You can get dielectric grease, but I recommend it. I'll leave what I recommend in the description below again. And then finally, you're going to need the spark plugs. For the Gallardo, you're going to need, or at least the pre-LP, you're going to need the PFR 7G-11S. And I'll link these in the description below as well. And the gap you're going to want on this is 0.8mm. So, but I'll show you how to gap those as well. So first off, you're going to take off this access panel, and then the same one on the other side. So on this side, you have a T25 Torx right here, a T25 Torx right here, T25 Torx right here. And then on this side, you have one right here, one in the back, one in that little divot right there, and then one right on top. This is for the Superleggera, but if you have a base Gallardo, so you might have, I think this panel's extended, and I believe this one is as well. It comes further back, but the procedure is the same. So now that we have that cover off, we're going to notice our first major problem with servicing these spark plugs. And the thing is that these coil packs, and subsequently the spark plugs, are right underneath this beam right here. But you'll notice on the left side, it's actually closer than it is on the right side. So we won't actually have to remove the beam on the right side. This is really interesting because this is actually, if you're not aware, this is an all-wheel drive car, but the transmission is actually behind the motor still. So what they do is they offset the V10 to the left just a little bit, so that way you can actually make room for the shaft that runs up to the front differential into the front of the car. So that's why it's a little bit offset, and that's why we have to remove this beam right here. So I'm going to do that next, and I'll show you exactly what bolts you need to remove to take this out. Alright, so to take this beam off, you're going to take a 13mm socket and unbolt the two bolts in the front, one on the right and then one on the left. I already took that one out, and I loosened these just for representation purposes. And then back here, you're going to want to take this fastener out, this one, and this one. These are already loose, just so you can get a reference for where they are. And then I'll show you how to take this beam out. If you're having issues taking this beam out, you can take that rear fascia off, and it might make it a little bit easier to access all these components. But in my case, I didn't have that issue. So let's take this beam out, and I'll show you how it comes out. You know, in my opinion, this really isn't that big of a deal to access all this stuff. I remember working on a, it was like some early 2000s like minivan, and like the motor was like transverse, so the motor was going this way, like longitudinal is this way, and the transverse is this way. I mean, I remember the V6 and the spark plugs are literally like underneath the damn windshield wipers, and like under all this like plastic cowling that would like break when you take it off. It's just a nightmare. So like this, like you think it's a big deal, but it really isn't. And it just pops out like that. It's really simple, to be honest with you. So now that we got that structural member out, we have to take out a T30 right here and right here. So I'll do that right now, and then this whole plate just comes right off. And taking those fasteners out was easy enough. So now we're just going to remove that cover plate. Be cognizant of this part right here. It's really close to the frame rail, so I like to take it out to the right and then pop it out. And you can see right there, whoever worked on this before, like scuffed it just a little bit. I don't even know why they have this, to be honest with you. This is actually a pretty heavy piece. Now think like if you're designing the Superleggera, aka the super lightweight edition of this car, you'd probably want to get rid of this heavy metal piece. It really doesn't do much. It might seal up the coil packs from getting water in them, but I don't know. These coil packs are sealed. I really just don't see the point. Whatever, this is what it looks like. So each one of these is a coil pack. So we're going to be unplugging these and then popping them out, and then underneath that is your spark plugs. So let's get into it. So taking off these plugs is a little bit tricky, especially if you only have one hand and you're holding onto the camera at the same time. But you're just going to pull on this little tab, and then as you're pulling on the tab, pull this down. If it doesn't come, you can actually pull on the tab and push it up, and that might release the little clip inside, and then the whole connector should come out. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to need 2 hands for this. I got this one, but yeah. Let me undo those. Alright, now that we have them unplugged, you're going to take 2 hands and just pull on the back of these. There's a special tool that you can get from Volkswagen or Audi, but I don't have that, never used it, don't really need it. So just get 2 hands in there and then pull them out, and they should pop right out. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, I got these 2. Let's put these to the side. Come on. Jeez. Okay, one more. Maybe I should get that special tool after all. Jeez. Got it. Cool. I'll watch out for that connector. That one. There we go. Some schmoo on that one. Don't know what that is. Take a look. Cool. Now we got the access to the spark plugs. Oh. Next, you're going to take your 16 millimeter socket or spark plug wrench if you have one, and just put them into the socket holes and loosen them up. Come on. There it is. I do this for all the banks, all the cylinders, not the banks. And then I'm going to come back and then just undo them by hand. And then I'm going to show you a special trick on how to get these actually out of the car. Let's see here. That was a little bit looser. That's interesting. Let's see here. Okay. Cool. So one trick I've really picked up over the years is the more swear words you use, the easier the job really is. So if you're having like a fastener that doesn't really want to come out, give that a shot and see if that works. I mean, it's especially on Volkswagen products, like Volkswagen Group cars, it's a trick that I think honestly is invaluable for anyone trying to do some DIY work. So give that a shot. Let me know if it works for you. All right, so here's my secret trick for getting these spark plugs out now that you've loosened them up. You can use a magnet, but what you should do, or what I do, is I just take one of the coil packs and I put it into the spark plug well, wiggle it around a little bit till it grasps onto the head of that spark plug, and then it comes right out. Super simple as that. So let's do that to all the cylinders. Super easy. Ugh, that was gross. Jeez. I'm glad I'm doing this. Okay. So before you install the spark plugs in the car, you're going to want to gap them. So what you're going to need for this is you're going to need a set of feeler gauges, and these are about, I don't know, maybe 10 bucks from a auto parts store, and then you're also going to need a gap gauge. These are kind of redundant because this is a gauge for like how thick, because you can see they're in increments, like this one's the thinnest and then this one's really thick. I like using this because it's very precise in terms of the thickness that you want between the electrode and the ground. You can see that in that little space right there. So what I use this one for is to bend it out, so I can increase the gap with this tool, and then I can actually use the bench, and I press down on the bench to decrease the gap. And of course you don't want to go back and forth, but the gap on these is a little bit too big. We should be at 0.8 millimeters, so that's this feeler gauge right here, and it should just be like a nice tight fit in there, but there's a little bit of a gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down on this until I get very close to it being just a nice tight fit in between the electrode and the ground right here. So, and if I go too far, I can use this to bend it back by inserting it like this and then just bending it. But I don't think I'll need to do that. So before you do that, before you put it in the car, be sure to do this because your motor won't run right. And if you need more information on this and you want to know more about spark plug gap, I'll link a good video that I found in the description below so you can have a little bit more information. But I'm going to do that to these plugs, and then we can put them in the car. One last thing before you put the coil packs back in the car, I would recommend you use a little bit of dielectric grease. I'll link something like this in the description below that you can use yourself. And I just insert it into the plug end body and just give it a good spurt just to make sure that everything, just to increase conductivity, and it helps seal it as well. Like they do this in new coil packs from the factory. Like if you look into a new coil pack, you'll actually see a little bit of dielectric grease in there. So good idea always to do that every time you have these out. So now that we have the spark plugs for this bank gapped and ready to go, what we're going to do is drop them into the cylinders. And then we're going to take our 16 millimeter socket and tighten it down. I'm just going to tighten these down by hand first, and then we're going to come back for the final torque in just a little bit. So let me do that for all 5. So once we have those in hand tight, we're going to take our 16 millimeter and our socket wrench, and we're going to turn it an additional about a half a turn to 2/3 of a turn, and you can kind of feel it tighten because there's a crush washer on the spark plug itself that you can feel crush down, and it'll finally stop crushing after you after you go about half a turn to 2/3 of a full revolution, right? So maybe 180 degrees, and I'm doing it in like small, like 45-degree increments. Just like that. It's really intuition more than anything, but you don't want to over tighten this as well. So I did that, and you just go onto the other cylinder and do it all for that. Every single one of them is just like that. There's some that have like a tapered profile on the spark plug, and you only want to tighten those an extra, like, I don't know, maybe 1/16 of a turn. So just be cognizant of that, which spark plug you have, if it's a crush washer or if it's like a tapered beveled edge on the actual sealing surface. So I'm going to do this to all the cylinders, and then get this side buttoned up. So next you're going to put the coil packs back in, and these just pop in. Make sure that you align the tabs of the coil pack all right here, with the tabs on the cylinder head cover, and you could hear it snap just like that. Oops. It should pop right onto those spark plugs, and then you can plug them back in. And the next thing I'm going to show you, well, the last thing I'm going to show you on this side is how to put that beam back in, because it's a little bit tricky. And then we're going to move over to the other bank. Okay, now that I have that cover on the coil packs, the last thing I have to do is put that structural member back in the car. And like I said previously, if it's a little bit easier for you to take this cover off to be able to get this beam back on, and you can go ahead and do that, this cover that is, but I think I was able to get it without that cover coming off. This takes a little bit of finagling. There it is. You gotta drop that beam right into place. The thing about this beam is it only wants to go in one way. So you just have to be a little bit careful and play with it. There we go. Just like that. Make sure all the bolt holes line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the fasteners in loose and then make sure everything lines up properly, and then I'll tighten them down with my 13mm socket. So I went ahead and installed this trim piece back onto the car after I tightened down that frame rail. So this side is completely done. And now moving on to the right side, we're going to actually have to move this coolant reservoir out of the way. So all you have to do is take your H6 hex socket and then get that little bolt right at the end right there. This is a little bit different on other cars. So if you have like an older Gallardo, this coolant reservoir looks a little bit different. But what you're going to want to do is take out this bolt right here, this fastener, and then the whole coolant reservoir just slides off, because we're going to want to get at this bracket that actually attaches the coolant reservoir to the rest of the car, and then we'll actually have access to the coil packs and then the spark plugs. So I'm going to take that bolt out, and then I'll show you how the coolant reservoir slides right out. And then this coolant reservoir is on kind of like a little slide rail system. So it just slides right out after you disconnect this connector, of course. And then we're going to place it somewhere to the right, just so it's out of the way a little bit. Come on. There it is. Don't worry about spilling anything. We're just trying to get it out of the way so we can get at this bracket underneath, because that's interfering from us being able to work on the coil packs. All right, now that that coolant reservoir is out of the way, we may want to make sure that the lines that we are going to the reservoir aren't strained. But you can see the bracket right underneath it. And we have two T40 Torx, one right here and then one in the back that we have to get to. This might be different on your car. If you have an older car, this is a 2008 Superleggera, so things are a little bit different, but I have this associated bracket in the way that I think these are 8mm bolts that you have to take out. So I'm going to take this bracket out, and then I'm going to take this plate out, and we should have access to the coil packs. So now what I like to do is I like to basically tuck the coolant reservoir in where it was before, so I have plenty of access to get at those the coil pack covers for one, and then the coil packs, because it's a little bit of a tight fit. But that bracket was blocking it, and you know, we can move this coolant reservoir back and forth just to get those coil packs. So ultimately not a big deal. But I'm going to take this cover off and then pull the coil packs out, and I'll show you where things like to be obstructed at. Alright, so just like the other side, I'm going to be taking the coil packs out. Like I said previously, I'm avoiding cylinder number 5 because I've already been in there, and I already placed the spark plug in there because I was actually seeing misfires in that coil pack. But other than that, it's just the same as the other side. it's just a little bit of a struggle. There we go. Put that on. And see, if that bracket was in the way, we wouldn't be able to get at this. But now that we move that, it's just a little bit easier. Now the coolant reservoir is in the way, so I'm going to move that out of the way now. Come on. It's kind of like holding it and then pulling them out really quick. But we won't have this issue with the spark plugs, at least. Just these long coil packs are the issue. Put that over there. You probably can't see anything now. Of course. Come on. Last one. Cool. So I'm going to use my 16mm wrench to take the spark plugs out and put the new ones in, and we should be good to go on this. Alright, so I've got the spark plugs in, I got the coil packs in, and then I got the cover for the coil packs on. And then I installed that little bracket, and the only thing I have left to do is to install the coolant reservoir back onto that little rail. And this is a little bit tricky. I usually can't get it the first try. So let's see if this lines up this time. Let's see here. There we go. Got it. Perfect. And if everything slides on, it might be cantilevered. And if it is, you're going to have to redo it. Make sure all the connectors are free. There's nothing obstructing it. And then you're going to make sure that this bolt hole lines up where it should, without any sort of, without you having to force it or any sort of obstruction or anything like that. So all we have to do with that coolant reservoir, once everything's in place and all the lines look good and they're lined up well, is put that little bolt in and tighten it down. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that little cover piece that was right here on, and this should be a complete job. So I'll show you what it looks like after that cover piece is back on. So there you have it, pretty simple fix. I have all the panels back on and the coolant reservoir in. That coolant reservoir is such a pain in the butt, but I was able to get it, thankfully. I guess the only thing that really bothers me is these little stickers. I'm thinking I'm going to have to get new ones of those eventually. But overall, pretty simple fix. I don't know. I liked it. Wasn't too hard. So overall, pretty simple fix. I actually didn't think it was that hard to work on, to be honest with you. A lot easier than some cars have been in the past for me. I guess the hardest part for me was taking that frame rail out. It looked pretty intimidating to begin with, but once I took those bolts out, it was pretty simple to get that part out, and I was down the road. So if this helped you, please like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, I'd really love to hear them in the comments below. And if I didn't give you enough detail on something, or if I overlooked something, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to help clarify that for you. And I hope this helped you. I hope this kind of demystified working on these cars for you just a little bit. I can imagine how hard it would be to think that maybe you have to take these cars to the dealership all the time, when in reality it's not entirely true at all. So I hope that helped as well, and I hope you look forward to more content like this in the future, because there's a couple things that need to be done on this car, and I look forward to doing them. So until next time, thanks.